A simple woman was kicked out of a car dealership. 24 hours later, her billionaire brother showed up. Before we begin, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more life-changing stories like this one. Enjoy the story. The morning sunlight spilled like golden syrup across the polished pavement outside one of the city's most exclusive luxury car dealerships. Inside, gleaming vehicles sat proudly on display: sleek sports cars, pristine SUVs, and high-performance machines with price tags that could buy small houses. Every surface inside shimmered, reflecting the kind of wealth that felt unreachable to most. Then the glass doors parted. Ella stepped inside quietly, almost apologetically. She wore a faded olive green sweater and black flats that had seen better days. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and a canvas tote hung from her shoulder. Her presence was barely a ripple in the ocean of opulence. No one turned to look. No one smiled. She hesitated just past the entrance, taking in the scene. A couple was laughing near a convertible. A man in a tailored suit was being ushered toward the premium section, with two salesmen flanking him. Everyone was dressed in silk and leather. Everything smelled like money. But Ella had done her homework. She wasn't here to gawk. She was ready, maybe not for a Maserati or a Porsche, but for something modest, pre-owned, and most importantly, reliable. Her little sedan had coughed its last breath 2 days ago. She worked 2 jobs. She had saved for nearly 2 years. Today was supposed to be a victory. She approached the front desk, where a young receptionist with perfect lashes was tapping away at a keyboard. Ella stood for a moment, then gently cleared her throat. The receptionist looked up, briefly. Her eyes flicked over Ella's worn outfit, her shoes, her tote bag. The fake smile that followed didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I was hoping to speak with someone about a car," Ella said with quiet determination. The receptionist tilted her head. "We don't do walk-ins for test drives. Did you schedule an appointment online?" "I wasn't planning to test drive today," Ella explained, pulling out a small notepad. "I just wanted to take a look at a few used models." The receptionist interrupted with a laugh so thin it barely existed. "We don't keep our used vehicles in the showroom. You'll want to check our website." "I did," Ella said, still calm. "It said to inquire in-store for availability." There was a pause, long enough to be uncomfortable, before the receptionist sighed and waved over a salesman. He was tall, well-dressed, and visibly irritated before he even reached them. "Jason, can you show her to the used section?" Jason looked Ella up and down like he was scanning a problem, not a customer. "Sure," he muttered. Ella smiled softly, still hopeful, still trying. They walked past rows of jaw-dropping cars, each with its own spotlight, as Jason's footsteps echoed impatiently beside hers. He didn't ask what she was looking for. He didn't offer information. He barely looked at her. Eventually, he stopped in front of a single sedan parked near the service area, far from the main display. "This is probably more your speed," he said flatly. Ella blinked. "Actually, I saw a hybrid on your site. I believe it was a 2019. "That one sold," he snapped. "Inventory changes fast." "Oh, okay," she replied, clearly thrown off. "Would it be possible to see any other listings?" "I brought my paperwork. I'm pre-approved for financing." Jason raised an eyebrow as if amused. "Look, lady," he sighed, "we're not a budget lot. Our buyers know what they're getting into when they walk in here. No offense, but you're wasting both of our time." The words hung in the air like poison. Ella's face flushed. I just wanted to ask." He raised his hand. "We're done here. I have a real customer waiting." And with that, he turned and walked away. For a moment, Ella stood there, frozen, unsure of what just happened. People around her carried on, oblivious or indifferent. The air felt colder now. Her feet felt heavier. Slowly, she turned and walked back through the shining maze of steel and chrome, each step echoing louder than the last. The camera would hold on her as she stepped back outside, the door closing with a hush behind her. The sunlight was blinding now, harsh, almost mocking. She squinted, blinking back the sting, not from the light, but from tears she refused to let fall. She walked across the lot with quiet dignity, though her heart felt crushed under the weight of humiliation. Her dreams of driving home in her first reliable car, of finally moving forward, felt childish now. How foolish it was to walk into a world that was never built for her. But even as the scene closed, there was something flickering in her eyes, a quiet fire. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't caused a scene. But something in her had changed. Because what no one in that building knew was that Ella wasn't alone. And when she got home that evening, she made a call. Not to a friend. Not to a bank. She called her brother. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in Ella's tiny apartment. The walls were bare, the lighting dim, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and exhaustion. She sat at her modest kitchen table, still in the same clothes from earlier that day, her purse slumped on the floor next to her chair. In front of her sat a cold cup of tea. She had made it hours ago when she first got home, hands trembling, hoping the warmth would settle her. But now it sat untouched, much like her mood. Flat. Silent. Wounded. She stared at the cup. The dealership scene replayed in her mind like a cruel loop. Jason's smirk, the receptionist's dismissiveness, the sting of being told she wasn't enough. For a while, she sat there, letting it wash over her again and again. Her phone buzzed once. A calendar reminder. Tomorrow. Work. 8 a.m. She swiped it away. And then she did something she hadn't done in over 6 months. She opened her contacts, scrolled halfway down, and paused. Mason Grant. Just the name alone carried weight. Her brother, once the quiet nerd who used to fix her Walkman, was now one of the most powerful tech CEOs in the country. They were close once, but life, ambition, and pride had slowly etched space between them. Ella never wanted to be the sibling who asked for help, especially not from someone whose face graced magazine covers and startup summits. But today wasn't about pride. Today was about pain. She stared at the screen, hovered her thumb over the call icon, then tapped it. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. She almost ended the call, but something inside her pushed forward. Beep. Hey, she started, her voice quiet. It's me. She paused, unsure where to begin. I know we haven't talked much lately. I guess I've just been figuring things out on my own. Her eyes flicked toward the tea again. I went to this dealership today. I thought maybe I could finally buy my own car. Nothing fancy, just something that runs. I've been saving for so long, and I really thought it would feel like a victory. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. But they looked at me like I was nothing, like I didn't belong there. They didn't even try to hide it. Another pause. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I'm not asking for anything. I guess I needed to hear a voice that doesn't make me feel small. Her throat tightened. The words she'd buried all day began to surface. You always said I was the strong one. Remember that? But today, I didn't feel strong. I felt invisible. Like I didn't matter. I hate that feeling. I hate how much it hurt. And I hate that I let it. She took a deep breath. I'm okay. I'll be okay. I just needed to say this out loud, even if you never hear it. I love you, Mason. Take care. She ended the call. For a few moments, she sat frozen, her eyes burning. The phone screen dimmed, and the silence returned. But it was a different kind of silence now, like something had shifted. She finally took a sip of the cold tea. It was bitter. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the skyline, Mason Grant stood on a balcony with a phone in hand. He had just missed the call. His assistant called his name from inside, reminding him about an investor meeting. He didn't answer. He played the voicemail. As Ella's voice filtered through the speaker, his face changed, softened. His eyes darkened with something quiet and dangerous. By the time she said, I felt invisible, his jaw clenched. He didn't say anything when it ended. He just turned, walked into the apartment, and said 4 words to his assistant. Clear my schedule. Tomorrow. The dealership opened promptly at 9 a.m. Just like the day before, the glass doors slid open to welcome the elite. Coffee brewed in the corner. Salespeople straightened their ties and polished their smiles. The same receptionist tapped away on her keyboard, her long nails clicking like clockwork. Jason, the smug salesman, leaned casually against the hood of a sports coupe, sipping his espresso and laughing with a coworker about some dreamer who wandered in yesterday. You should have seen her, man. Looked like she got lost on the way to a bus stop, he chuckled. Did she cry? The other asked. Nearly. I was this close, Jason smirked, snapping his fingers. Outside, the sun blazed down on the shimmering lot, but something was different about today. There was a tension in the air, like the moment before a storm rolls in. And then, the low rumble of an approaching engine. Not just any engine. This wasn't the purr of a sports car. This was deeper, heavier. It vibrated the glass. It made people look up from their screens, spill their coffee, pause mid-sentence. Slowly, heads turned toward the glass doors, where a shadow grew larger. A car pulled up so smoothly, so impossibly sleek, it didn't look like it belonged on the road. It looked like it had descended from the future. It was a custom Maybach Accelero, jet black, with mirror-finished chrome accents, matte rims, and doors that lifted like wings. People rushed to the windows. Phones came out. Even Jason dropped his coffee. The driver's door opened. Out stepped Mason Grant. Tailored black suit. No tie. Sunglasses that screamed precision. He didn't walk. He moved with the weight of a man who didn't need to speak to command attention. He was younger than most CEOs, but everything about him was refined, razor-sharp. Inside, the receptionist stood frozen, mouth slightly open. Jason squinted through the glass. "Is that who I think it is?" Someone whispered. "That's Mason Grant. He's worth, what, $10 billion? He built that AI platform. They say his watch alone costs more than a house." Mason entered the dealership with the calm force of an approaching tidal wave. His eyes scanned the room once and landed on Jason. Jason blinked, confused, then straightened his collar. Mason walked directly to him. The whole dealership was silent. "You work here?" Mason asked, coolly. Jason's voice caught in his throat. "Why, yes, sir." "Jason." Mason's eyes narrowed slightly. "You remember a woman who came in yesterday?" he asked. "Brown hair. Green sweater. Asked about a hybrid?" Jason hesitated. I think so. Yeah. She didn't. Looked like she was ready to buy. I didn't know." Mason stepped closer. "That woman," he said, voice low, "is my sister." Jason's face went pale. Mason looked around the dealership, voice rising just enough to carry. "She came here to buy a car. She was treated like trash. Mocked. Humiliated." The silence in the showroom grew suffocating. "I don't care about your quotas. I don't care about your dress codes. But I care how you treat people, especially people who don't walk in here dripping in money. That's the difference between a business that lasts and one that burns." He turned to the dealership manager, who had just stepped out of his office, sweat already dotting his brow. "I want a full written apology sent to her address within the hour," Mason said. "And Jason." Jason swallowed hard. "You're done." Jason stammered. "Sir, please, it was a misunderstanding. She didn't look like Shia." "That's the problem," Mason said. "She didn't look like your idea of a buyer." With that, Mason turned, pulled out his phone, and dialed. "Ella," he said gently, the anger melting from his voice, "I'm outside. You have 5 minutes to come pick a car. Any car." From the phone, a soft laugh, tired, disbelieving. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," Mason said. "But I wanted to." And as the camera pans wide, Mason standing at the center of the dealership, employees stunned, Jason humiliated, and Ella on her way, viewers are left with one powerful truth. You never know who you're looking down on. Until they look back. Ella stood beside the cobalt blue hybrid coupe, her fingers tracing the smooth curve of the door handle. The glassy finish of the vehicle mirrored the morning sun like a polished gem, gleaming proudly at the edge of the dealership's neatly aligned fleet. Jason, now suddenly all smiles and polished courtesy, held the keys out to her like an offering, but his fingers trembled ever so slightly. It was subtle, but Mason noticed. He was watching, always watching, arms crossed over his finely tailored jacket, the embodiment of quiet menace. "Would you like to take it for a drive?" Jason asked, his voice lifted with strained enthusiasm. Ella didn't answer right away. She stood silently, her body still, as if absorbing the moment. Her eyes lingered not on the car but on Jason's face, a quiet mirror to the chaos beneath his polished exterior. He was nervous, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. She saw the flicker of recognition, the discomfort of a man being forced to reckon with the weight of yesterday's arrogance. Finally, she took the keys. No words. Just a slight nod. She slipped into the driver's seat. The interior wrapped around her in luxury, all leather and precision. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. She let herself remember the sting of Jason's dismissal, the way his eyes had raked over her thrifted clothes, the curl of disdain in his lip, the way she'd been shooed out like stray wind. But that version of her no longer existed, not today. Jason climbed into the passenger seat. His movements were stiff, mechanical. Mason opened the back door and took his place silently behind them, his presence thick with unspoken warning. As Ella pressed the ignition, the engine responded with a soft, powerful hum. She rested her hands on the wheel, her grip firm but graceful. They pulled out of the dealership slowly, Jason chattering nervously about specs and mileage. "You've got great handling here," he began, his voice trying too hard to sound natural. "Adaptive steering, high-efficiency battery, and of course, the luxury package includes." "Yesterday," Ella said, cutting in softly but firmly, You told me I didn't belong here." Jason's words caught in his throat. He glanced at her, then quickly away. His throat bobbed. I didn't mean." "You did." Her tone didn't rise, but it held more weight than any shout. "You meant every word." Silence stretched across the space between them. Even the city outside seemed to quiet down, as though listening. "I was mistaken," he muttered, eyes down. "No," came Mason's voice from the back, calm and deliberate. "You weren't mistaken. You were arrogant." Jason stiffened, but said nothing. Ella kept driving. The city blurred past, cobbled streets, steel towers, early morning joggers. She navigated them all effortlessly, her eyes sharp, posture poised. But inside, emotion swirled. Not anger. No, she was far beyond that. What she felt now was reclamation. Control. She was no longer the woman shamed out of a showroom. She was the woman driving this car, with them as passengers. She turned into a side street lined with high-end boutiques and cafes. The car floated over the pavement, effortlessly graceful. "You looked at me and decided I wasn't worth your time," she continued, her voice steady. "But you didn't know who I was. You didn't think to ask. You saw what I wore, how I spoke, and you thought that was enough." Jason opened his mouth, then shut it. Nothing he said would change what happened. And somehow, he knew better than to insult her with hollow apologies. The car turned again, heading back toward the dealership. "I'm not here to shame you," Ella said. "I'm here to teach you something." Jason turned slightly, curious despite himself. "What's that?" "Never underestimate people," she said. "Because the world has a funny way of putting power in unexpected hands." They arrived back at the dealership. The building loomed ahead, glass gleaming under the sun. Ella parked with quiet precision and stepped out. Jason followed, slow and awkward. Mason exited last, walking up beside his sister with the unhurried ease of someone who owned the world beneath his feet. Inside, the staff had gathered behind the showroom windows. They pretended not to stare, but failed miserably. Whispers bounced through the corridors like electricity. Jason tried one last time. "I truly am sorry," he said, "for how I treated you. It was unprofessional." Ella turned to face him fully. Her face was soft, but her eyes were unflinching. "Unprofessional," she repeated. "Jason, you humiliated me. You looked through me like I didn't exist. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. But I'm giving you a choice now. Learn from this, or lose more than just a sale next time." Jason swallowed hard and nodded. Ella turned and walked toward the front doors of the dealership. Every step echoed. Mason followed beside her, saying nothing, but his slight smile said it all. They paused outside. A valet rushed to open the passenger door of Mason's custom, jet-black hypercar, a machine so rare that even the dealership staff had never seen one in person. Cameras clicked in the distance. Phones came out. Ella looked back one last time at the dealership, at Jason, at all of them. Then she stepped inside the car, doors closing with a soft hiss, sealing the moment behind her like the final page of a book. As they pulled away, Jason stood alone on the curb. He watched until the car disappeared. And he knew he would never forget her face. The walls of Ella's modest apartment, once filled with silence, now pulsed with a new energy. Outside, her blue hybrid coupe sat, parked like a dream realized, once unattainable, now a quiet emblem of the journey she'd been on. Her neighbors, who once pretended not to notice her, now waved and smiled when they saw her, lingering for small talk as if they were just as caught up in her transformation as she was. Ella's life had gone from invisible to seen, and soon, it would shift from seen to watched. But for now, she was still trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had swept her up. Sitting at her small kitchen table, sipping tea, and flipping through a notebook filled with errands and reminders, Ella had found a strange, tentative peace. The kind of peace that comes from facing the unexpected, like a small victory in a world that had often overlooked her. But then her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her quiet reflection. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Was it more media, more attention she hadn't asked for? Reluctantly, she picked up. "Hello." Her voice was cautious, her fingers gripping the phone tightly. "Miss Grant," came a bright, polished voice. "This is Natalie Parks with WCN News. We've heard an incredible story about your recent experience at a local dealership, and we'd love to talk to you." On camera, Ella nearly dropped her cup in shock. Her heart skipped a beat. Still cautious. "Well," Natalie continued, laughing lightly, "it's gone a bit viral. The footage from the dealership's security cameras, someone leaked it. Your brother, Mason Grant? The Maybach? It's all over the internet. People are calling it the Cinderella clapback. Cinderella? The words hit Ella like a ton of bricks. She blinked, taking a deep breath, trying to process the strange mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Would you be willing to do a sit-down interview? Just to tell your side of things. Ella stared out the window, the distant skyline blurred by her thoughts. She could still feel the sting of that humiliation, the way she had walked out of that dealership, small, invisible, unnoticed. But now, everything was different. The world had taken notice, and she had a choice. Yes, she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. I'll do it. The studio was bright, soft lighting casting a welcoming glow as the cameras rolled. Ella sat across from Natalie in a comfortable chair, a simple blue blouse, the only statement she made. No flashy clothes, no makeup meant to distract. It was just her. For the first time in a long time, she didn't need to be anyone else. Ella, Natalie began, her tone warm and professional. The world is calling you the most graceful woman to ever walk out of a dealership. You were humiliated. Then your brother showed up in the most expensive car they've ever seen. What was going through your head that day? Ella smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth pulling up just enough to show she understood the irony. Honestly, she said, her voice steady. I just wanted a reliable car. Something to help me keep going. I didn't expect kindness, but I didn't expect cruelty either. Natalie nodded thoughtfully, leaning in slightly. Did you know Mason would show up? Ella's smile faltered, her heart skipping a beat as she thought back to that moment. Not at all, she said, her voice catching slightly. I cried the night I left the dealership. I told him about it on the phone, but I wasn't asking for help. I just needed someone to hear me. There was a brief pause, the air between them filled with the weight of the unspoken. Natalie's voice softened, her gaze focused intently on Ella. And when he did show up? Ella took a moment to gather herself, her voice quiet but full of emotion. I remembered what it feels like to be protected, she said softly, her eyes dropping to her hands, where the memory of the day seemed to still linger. As Ella spoke, the footage of Mason's arrival played on the screen behind her. The Maybach rolled up to the dealership, its sleek, shining surface reflecting the disbelief of the staff as Mason stepped out. His presence was commanding, towering over the stunned employees, his finger pointing at Jason, the salesman who had dismissed Ella. And then, there was Ella, walking back into the dealership with quiet dignity, her head held high, making her decision with poise and grace. The contrast between the chaos Mason had brought and the serenity Ella exuded was stark, yet beautiful. This story hit a nerve with a lot of people, Natalie said, returning to the interview. What do you think they saw in you? Ella thought for a long moment. The room around her felt distant, her mind far away, retracing every step that had led her to this point. I think they saw themselves, she said softly, her voice thick with understanding. We've all been judged, all been underestimated. But sometimes, it takes just one person to remind the world that we're worth seeing. Back in her apartment, later that night, Ella sat alone in the stillness. The interview had aired hours ago, and her phone had buzzed relentlessly ever since. Social media was ablaze, comments flooding in from all over. Yet, despite the noise outside, the room around her was quiet. She didn't want to be swept up in it. She wasn't sure what it all meant yet, but she knew that this moment was something she'd never imagined she'd experience. On the coffee table sat a framed photo of her and Mason as kids, before the empire, before the tech world, before any of this had ever happened. It felt like a lifetime ago. She picked up her phone again and scrolled for a moment before dialing Mason's number. Hey, she said softly when he picked up. Hey, Mason replied, his voice a steady anchor. They're calling me Cinderella, Ella said with a smile, her voice shaking slightly, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Mason chuckled. You always liked fairy tales. Ella smiled. You know what? I think this one's just getting started. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen as she ended the call, the soft hum of the city outside filling the quiet of the room. Ella looked out the window again, the night sky stretching endlessly before her. The world was watching now, yes. But it wasn't just about them. It was about her. Her story. Her voice. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like it was enough. She had something to say, and it wasn't just a moment of fleeting fame. It was something that would last. The phone buzzed again, offers, requests, meetings, but she ignored it. Tonight, there was only her. Only the quiet peace of knowing that the revolution wasn't loud. It was steady, and it was hers. Ella walked into the lobby, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The golden marble shimmered under the overhead lights, and glass walls stretched up to the ceiling, giving the space an almost otherworldly feel. As she approached the reception desk, a young assistant with wide eyes greeted her, nodding nervously as she led Ella through a maze of hallways toward a sleek, private boardroom. Ella could feel her nerves tightening, but she refused to show it. She didn't belong here, but here she was invited. Just a week ago, she'd been humiliated at a car dealership for simply asking about a used car. The salespeople had dismissed her with condescending smiles, and when she'd left, her heart had shattered. The walk back to her small apartment had felt like a defeat, but here, in this marble palace of wealth, Ella had earned a place. Now, she stood at the threshold of a moment that could change her life. The company that had once turned her away was now offering her a chance to step into a world she'd never even imagined. Serena Dale, the CEO of Revin Motors, sat at the end of the long, polished table, flanked by a group of sharp-suited executives, their eyes gleaming with a curiosity that felt almost predatory. "Ella Grant," Serena said, her voice smooth and rehearsed, as she rose from her chair with a polished smile. "You've shaken the industry without lifting a finger. Your story, your grace, your face, it's what brands dream of." Ella felt the weight of those words sink in, but she said nothing. Instead, she let the silence stretch, holding her ground. She could feel the eyes of the executives on her, assessing, calculating. Serena took a step forward, her eyes not leaving Ella's. "We'd like to offer you a role as our diversity and customer relations consultant. Help us redefine our approach, rebuild our image. You'll be compensated handsomely." Ella glanced at the offer packet on the table in front of her, her name printed in glossy ink on the top. The number at the top of the first page made her breath catch, a sense of disbelief washing over her. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. But something inside of her snapped. She couldn't take this. Not yet. Not without addressing the elephant in the room. "You think money fixes humiliation?" she asked, her voice steady, no hint of emotion. "Do you honestly think a paycheck can undo what happened?" Serena hesitated, the facade slipping for just a moment. "No," she replied, her tone softer than before. "But maybe it creates room to change what caused it." Ella didn't respond. Instead, she just stared at the contract, letting the weight of her decision settle over her. There was a part of her that wanted to refuse, to walk out and never look back. But another part of her, the part that had fought for so long, couldn't help but wonder if this offer was a door opening, one that had been shut for so long. Later, Ella stood alone on the rooftop garden of the building. The city sprawled below her, humming with life. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the skyline. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a stream of messages lighting up the screen. Media interviews, influencer deals, sponsorships. Mason's name flashed across the screen, and she didn't hesitate. She answered the call. "They made you an offer, didn't they?" he asked immediately, his voice filled with expectation. "Yeah," Ella replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "They did. And I don't know, Mason. It feels fake. Like they're only doing it because they got caught." "You're right," he said, his voice a mixture of support and understanding. "But sometimes, even fake doors open real rooms. You have a chance to step into places where women like you never get invited. This is your moment, Ella. Don't let it slip away." Ella let his words sink in, feeling the weight of his encouragement pressing down on her chest. She stared at the city below, but she wasn't seeing it. Her mind flashed back to the moments of her life that had brought her here, the late nights working at the diner, the missed family birthdays, the sacrifices she'd made to get this far. She had fought for every inch. She hadn't asked for any of it, but she had earned it. "I didn't ask for any of this," she whispered, barely audible. "No," Mason said, "but you earned every second of it." His words settled in her heart like a gentle reminder of the strength she'd found within herself. It was hers now. This was her fight, her win. The next day, Ella walked into the boardroom again. There was no makeup, no designer clothes, just Ella, plain, ordinary Ella. She sat down across from the executives, the packet of offers still on the table between them. "I'll accept the offer," she said slowly, her voice calm and unwavering. "But on my terms." The room fell silent. The executive shifted, unsure of what she meant. Serena's eyes flickered with curiosity, but she remained composed. "I'm not your token. I'm not your redemption story," Ella continued, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "If you want me on your team, you better understand one thing. I want real change. Not just your image, but how you treat the people who walk through your doors. No matter what they look like or what they ask for." Serena nodded, a quiet respect in her gaze. She didn't speak for a moment, just studied Ella. Ella pressed on. "You want my face on your campaign? Then you better let me use my voice, too. I'll be your consultant, but it won't just be for the optics. I'll make sure your brand stands for something more than just a pretty picture. I want people to feel seen when they walk into your dealerships. I want them to feel like they belong." There was no resistance in the room, only a newfound respect. Serena looked at the other executives, then back at Ella. The air in the room shifted, the tension replaced by something else, something real. Ella stood up, walked toward Serena, and extended her hand. Serena shook it firmly, her smile genuine, though still practiced. "I'll be seeing you around," Ella said, her steps now steady, unshakable. She walked out of the boardroom, her heart racing, but this time, with a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a woman who had been humiliated. She was a force to be reckoned with. Ella stepped out of the building into the cool evening air, the city alive with movement around her. The streets buzzed with the energy of 1,000 stories, 1,000 lives. And now, her story would be one of them, a revolution in motion. She had finally stepped into the room she had earned, and there was no going back. Her story was no longer just a headline. It was a beginning. Ella stood in front of the podium, the hall alive with the sounds of laughter and casual conversations. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting a soft golden glow across the space. The room was filled with folding chairs that had been neatly arranged and handmade banners that hung proudly from the walls. This wasn't the glitzy atmosphere of a red carpet event. No, this was a humble, intimate gathering, a community coming together for something real. Ella's heart swelled as she surveyed the scene. She had quietly started this program, Drive with Dignity, a nonprofit designed to help women access reliable transportation, financial literacy, and dignity. It was the very thing that had once been denied to her in a world that had judged her based on appearance and class. But now, as she stood in front of this crowd, she realized just how far she had come. The podium was simple, the stage small, but the people in this room weren't here for fame or recognition. They were here because they believed in what Ella was doing. The love, the hope, the support, they weren't about labels. They were about the people, the very real faces that filled the room. Mason stepped through the back doors, dressed casually in jeans and a quiet smile. He caught her eye from across the room and gave her a thumbs up. That small gesture, that silent support, grounded her. She was ready. She adjusted the note cards in her hand, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. 2 months ago, I walked into a dealership needing help and walked out feeling invisible. I never imagined that moment would become a movement. But here we are. Her voice was steady as she spoke, and the crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. "I didn't start this to prove a point," Ella continued. "I started it because I know what it's like to feel small in a world that measures worth by appearance. I also know what happens when we lift each other up instead." There was a moment of silence. The room seemed to absorb her words, the weight of them sinking in. The crowd wasn't just listening, they were with her, every step of the way. It wasn't just about cars. It wasn't about one woman's battle against a corporation. It was about dignity, about empowering people who had been left behind by a world that had forgotten them. Back at the dealership, things were changing. The cold, impersonal space that had once humiliated Ella was now filled with new energy. The welcome desk had been redesigned to reflect a message of respect and inclusion. Signage now proudly displayed the words, "Respect drives us." Jason, the arrogant salesman who had once scoffed at Ella, no longer worked there. And Serena Dale, the CEO of Revin Motors, stood beside Ella as they introduced new inclusive hiring policies. The dealership was no longer just a business. It was becoming a reflection of the values that had been built, not by profit or manipulation, but by a simple act of courage. Even Martin, the older mechanic who had once treated Ella with an almost fatherly kindness, was now helping train recruits, teaching them about empathy-based service. The shift was real. The change wasn't because they had been forced to. It wasn't because they were being punished for their past mistakes. It was because one woman had dared to challenge the silence, dared to speak up for the countless others who had been ignored and dismissed. The dealership had changed, but Ella wasn't finished. Ella sat on her couch later that evening, the weight of the day settling over her. The room was quiet, save for the sound of the occasional car passing by outside her apartment. She flipped through a book filled with handwritten letters, notes from women across the country, each sharing their own stories of overcoming judgment, of finding second chances, of taking first steps towards something better. Ella closed the book gently, placing it beside her on the couch, next to the worn notebook she had kept since that first phone call to Mason. She stared out the window at the city lights below. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Messages, offers, requests, meetings. The world was moving faster than she ever thought it could. She silenced it. Not everything needed to be a headline now. She didn't need the constant attention. What mattered now was the real work. The small moments, the quiet moments where change was made. That's where her heart was, not in the media buzz or the fame that